Welcome to the Night Library. Tonight we'll be exploring what darkness is. Section 1. What darkness is. Darkness is not a thing that exists on its own. It has no mass, no energy, and no behavior. It does not move, spread, or act. Nothing is added to a space when it becomes dark. Darkness is simply the condition that exists when light is no longer reaching a surface. That definition is plain, but it's the one everything else depends on. Light is a physical process. It is energy traveling through space in the form of electromagnetic waves. These waves leave a source, the sun, a flame, a bulb, and they move outward until they are absorbed, scattered, or reflected. Vision depends entirely on this process. You do not see objects directly. Your eyes detect a light that has interacted with objects and then reached the retina. The color, brightness, and shape of what you see are all encoded in how that light has been modified by the surfaces it encounters. When that flow of light stops, vision stops supplying information. Nothing else changes. When a room goes dark, the room itself is unchanged. The same objects remain in the same positions. The same materials are present. The same forces are acting. What is changed is that the photons are no longer arriving at your eyes in sufficient quantity to form an image. Darkness is not something that fills a space. It is the absence of illumination in that space. And this is why darkness disappears instantly when a light is turned on. There is no process to reverse. There is nothing to remove. The moment light resumes traveling and reflecting, the condition we call darkness no longer applies. It is useful to separate darkness from night. Night is a planetary event. It happens when a rotating planet turns away from its star. Darkness is local. You can have darkness during the day in an enclosed space, and you can have light at night from artificial sources, fire, or reflected sunlight. Darkness does not belong to a time of day. It belongs to a level of illumination. This distinction matters because it removes any sense that darkness is a global state. It is always specific to a place and dependent on light sources. From a physical standpoint, darkness has no independent properties. It does not have temperature, it does not exert pressure, and it does not interact with matter. In physics, we do not describe darkness as something present. We describe it as a lack of radiant energy in the visible range. The room does not contain darkness. The room simply lacks visible light. This absent-based definition explains why darkness behaves so consistently. Darkness does not block light. It does not resist illumination. When light enters a dark space, it travels, reflects, and scatters exactly as it would in a bright one. There is no boundary where darkness ends and light begins. There is only a gradual increase in photon density as illumination rises. What we perceive as a sharp transition is a limitation of our eyes, not a feature of the environment. It is also important to note that complete darkness is rare. Even at night, there is usually some light present. Starlight, moonlight, distant artificial sources, reflected illumination from clouds or terrain. In most environments, illumination varies continuously rather than dropping to zero. Your visual system works with whatever information is available. Darkness is simply the point at which that information becomes insufficient for detailed vision. Another way to say this is that darkness is not a state the world enters. It is a condition defined by the relationship between light sources, surfaces, and observers. If there is no observer, darkness has no meaning at all. Without eyes or sensors, there is no distinction between dark and light, only energy present or absent. And this is not a philosophical statement, it's a physical one. Darkness only exists as a description of insufficient illumination relative to a detecting system. So, at the most basic level, darkness is not mysterious. It is an active presence. It does not alter the environment. It does not do anything. It is simply what remains when light is no longer carrying information to a surface and then to an eye. In the next section, we'll look at what changes when illumination drops. Not in the world itself, but in how visual systems collect and interpret information when light becomes scarce. Section 2. What changes when light drops? When illumination decreases, the physical environment remains unchanged. The same surfaces are present, arranged in the same way, governed by the same physical rules. What changes is how visual systems operate when fewer photons are available. Human vision is not continuous across all light levels. It operates in overlapping modes, each optimized for a different range of illumination. At the back of the eye, the retina contains two primary types of light-sensitive cells, cones and rods. Cones are responsible for color vision and fine spatial detail. They function best when light levels are relatively high. Cones respond to different wavelengths of light, which is why color perception is possible in daylight and well-lit environments. Rods are far more sensitive to light, but they do not distinguish color. They provide lower resolution information and are better at detecting motion and broad shapes. As illumination drops, cone activity decreases and rod activity becomes dominant. This transition is known as dark adaptation. It does not happen instantly. It unfolds gradually over several minutes as chemical processes in the retina adjust sensitivity. This shift explains several common features of low-light vision. Color fades because rods do not encode wavelength differences. Objects that appear distinct in color begin to converge towards similar shades of gray. Edges soften because rods collect information over larger regions of the retina. Precision is traded for sensitivity. Fine detail becomes harder to resolve because fewer photons are available to define small spatial differences. None of this indicates a change in the environment. It reflects a change in how information is sampled. Another effect becomes noticeable as illumination decreases, signal-to-noise ratio. Even in the absence of light, retinal cells generate small amounts of background activity. This activity is random and normally insignificant compared to signals produced by incoming light. As light levels drop, the signal weakens while the background noise remains. The ratio between meaningful signal and internal noise decreases. And this is why very dark scenes can appear grainy or unstable. The visual system is operating close to its detection threshold, where random fluctuations become more apparent. This noise is not coming from the environment. It is intrinsic to the sensory system. Low light also alters how the brain interprets spatial information. In bright conditions, depth perception relies on multiple cues: contrast gradients, shadows, texture, color differences, and binocular disparity. As illumination drops, many of these cues weaken or disappear. Without strong depth cues, distances become harder to estimate. Objects may feel closer or farther than expected. Spaces may feel less clearly defined. The geometry of the room has not changed. The available visual references have. There is also a redistribution of sensory weighting. As visual input becomes less reliable, the brain places slightly more emphasis on other sources of information: hearing, touch, and internal bodily signals. This is not a special state or adaptation unique to darkness. It is a general feature of sensory integration. When one input channel provides less information, the others carry more relative weight. This rebalancing happens automatically and continuously. It is important to emphasize what low light does not do. It does not introduce new information. It does not add structure to the environment. It does not cause motion or change. Low illumination simply reduces the amount of visual data available per moment. The brain continues to operate normally. It predicts, integrates, and interprets based on the information it receives. When information is sparse, interpretation becomes broader and less precise. From a systems perspective, darkness represents a boundary condition. Vision works extremely well across a wide range of light levels, but it is not infinite. As illumination approaches the lower limit of detection, the system transitions from detailed representation to coarse approximation. This boundary is smooth, not abrupt. There is no moment when vision turns off. There is only a gradual loss of resolution, color, and certainty. Understanding darkness in this way places it firmly in the category of ordinary physical conditions. It is not a separate state the world enters. It is not an active influence. It is not something imposed on a space. Darkness is simply the point at which illumination becomes insufficient for detailed visual encoding. Seen this way, darkness is predictable. Given a light source, a distance, a set of surfaces, and a visual system, the transition from light to dark follows consistent rules. Nothing new appears. Nothing in the environment changes its behavior. Only the flow of information decreases. Darkness, then, is not a feature of the world so much as a description of a relationship between energy, matter, and perception. When light falls below a certain level, vision changes how it operates. That change is mechanical, measurable, and well understood. The world itself remains exactly as it was.